Now look at the end of verse 1. See, it says, which he sent and signified by his angel, and then the ending, to his servant, John. When the Bible ends, in chapter 22 of Revelation, there are only two things left in the universe, God and his servants. That's all. Everything else, he's uncreated and recreated. He makes new heavens, new earth, it's all new. All the rebels are forever suffering the vengeance of his wrath against their sin that they wanted to pay for, so they do forever out of his presence. And then we're there, his servants. So look what I wrote. Revelation is a systematic repetition of everything God says we need to know to live as his servants. Why do I say that? The book of Revelation has 404 verses, but it quotes the rest of the Bible 800 times. The book of Revelation is kind of like a switchboard where all the lines are coming from the other 65 books and they're connected into one place. And God doesn't introduce anything new in Revelation. He just repeats old stuff and kind of puts it in this vivid explanation of how it fits. Servanthood was the plan Jesus had for his life. Do you remember Matthew 20:28? The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and what? Give his life, what? A ransom for many. That's one of those famous verses we memorize and learn. It was the operating system of Christ's greatest servant and follower, named the Apostle Paul. What does he call himself? Paul. How does he open most of his epistles? Paul, a what? Bondservant of Jesus Christ. He called himself, he introduces himself as a servant. What is servanthood, by the way? Well, have you ever seen Ben-Hur or any of those movies about galley slaves? The Roman world, the Greek language, described the Roman world with 8 types of slaves. There were millions of slaves in the Roman world. 8 specific types of slaves operated the Roman Empire. There were the very famous slaves. They were called therapon, Therapon. We have that word in English called therapists, a therapist. You go to your therapist. All Romans that were wealthy had their therapons. And you wouldn't have known they were slaves. They kind of followed you around the store and they would hold your purchases and they'd say, oh, that color looks pretty good on you. Or they would follow you in your business and write stuff down and say, yep, yeah, we're doing great with the crops. We need more avocado planting next year. They were a slave, but they were a therapon. They discussed things with the master. So that was a top-ranked slave. There were others. You probably heard of a diakonos. We call them deacons. They were like waiters. They brought stuff to you. They were ministering servants, So at the meals, they were busy and they were pouring the wine and everything. So diakonos. And the church has those, deacons and deaconesses. There were liturgoi. Those were the temple slaves. They were kind of like priests, and you'd go to a Roman god's worship, and you'd hand your offering, and they'd take it, and they'd do whatever needed to be done with it. They were a slave. But the very bottom slave were these galley slaves. You can kind of see the paddles go to kind of a little blurry, but they're men on 3 levels that are paddling. Those men were chained. Their arms and legs were chained, and they were connected to the boat. So they were lifelong paddlers, and as soon as they were too old and sick to paddle, they just unhooked the chains and threw them overboard. They were kind of like disposable AA batteries. That's what they were. That's what a slave was. So the word for that is huper, which is the Greek word for under, retes, which is the word for rowing. They were called huperetes. So Paul's testimony, and you can read it in 1 Corinthians 4:1, he said, consider me a servant, and there's the word, huperetes, of Christ. It's the same word that God uses to describe David in Acts 13:36. Now, you know what's interesting? The most written about person in the whole Bible is David, 141 chapters about his life. The most successful person in the New Testament that does more recorded than anybody else is Paul. And both of them call themselves, God labels them as servants, just like John, as a servant. God's two greatest servants use the same word. What did an under rower do? They rowed to the captain's beat. They rowed together. They trusted the captain because, he knew when they were going to get fed and he knew when they were going to get there. They just had to trust him. They were chained for life. They didn't have any flexibility. They were doing what he said. And by the way, when a under rower did what he was doing, no one saw him. You notice none of the under rowers are walking around with the little Roman insignia on their head. They were doing their job. You say, what's this history lesson? Well, why did Paul and why did God call David and why did Paul call himself this kind of servant? Because Paul said, the way I serve God is I'm submissive. You know what that means? A servant doesn't mind being told what to do. You know what the greatest thing you can be in life? A servant. And be willing for God to tell you what to do. And if you serve in the church, for others to tell you what to do. Jesus said, I didn't come to be served. I didn't come to make you all do what I want you to do. I came to serve you and to give to you. That's the greatest life. A sensitive, trusting, dedicated, humble life. How do I please the Lord? By making a daily choice. Like John, like Paul, like David.